I started the recording. Hopefully nobody has an objection to that, or do they? Should have asked first.
Oh, that's fine. Welcome everybody to the RChain Education for today, Tuesday, April 21st. So I posted some links in the chat. There are also the same links that are, I need to post them in the Discord as well for the education log. So we had a great session last week with Tomislav leading the conversation with the tutorial. Tomislav, did you have anything in mind for this week, or what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so from last time, Arthur asked for that I show how to debug in IntelliJ. So now I'm trying to rebuild the project with latest dev, and it's still compiling. So so this is the first thing, and also I would like to talk about the code. So
okay.
More specifically about tagless final encoding that we are using in RChain project. Right. So
okay.
I found a very nice post from John DeGo about. I mean, he's advertising his library Zero, but he's also, you know, he's explaining very good what are the limitations of tagless final in Scala. So I would like to go to this article, to his article, and you know, just like give high-level overview of, you know, how this is used, and you know, we cannot go into details completely, but you know, just that maybe you can more easier, you can be easier to read existing code that you have.
Okay.
Our code it's not written in tagless final completely, but you know, we are going into this direction. So
okay.
if do you have something else in mind, guys?
No, it's kind of a loose agenda. You know, we're kind of essentially we're following the Scala RChain Scala educational series. You know, as a default, what we can do is talk about, you know, the series and how we want to structure it and all the pieces, but lead the way with those topics, Tomislav, and towards the latter half of the session, we can talk about, you know, the content materials that we're creating, and also I've been engaging with Theo, who created a document. We can talk about what Theo's working on as well. So feel free to go ahead and talk about what you want to do.
Hi, this is Arthur. Can I just ask one question? I mean,
Sure.
now that we're learning to like develop, I really think we need a session on the workflow process to do pull requests and get code merged in, you know, into the repo.
Yeah, sure. Are you aware of developer documentation or you know,
yeah,
like intro?
I've read it, but maybe it's there. I mean, like right now, for example, you know, I used your extension to, you know, call an HTTP server, and it's like really useful. And you know, we really need to do something around that for an extension scenario, but I don't know who to engage with, right? I don't know what the first step is. Do you create an issue? Do you post something on Discord? And then who do you engage in the conversation? And then how does it get reviewed and stuff like that, right? It's kind of that sort of thing.
So for me, this is also not easy to answer, because I'm not aware. We had, I think, very little contributions outside of the core developers.
Okay.
So we can definitely together think about, you know, how can we open this to more developers, and you know.
Oh, okay, because otherwise I'm developing just on my own branch. Okay.
Sorry?
Otherwise I'm just developing on my own branch. It doesn't ever get checked in. Right?
Yeah. I mean, it would be great that you know, we can have some workflow how to, you know, how to talk about this, and how to decide. And because now it's very difficult, because it's just 3 of us who can, you know, review the code, or you know, and
Right.
and we are not completely sure, you know, how to do it, because you know, everything happens really quickly. So, but yeah, I would like to.
I mean, there's, you know, a standard practice of entering issues and making pull requests. I mean, I don't really understand the problem here. I mean, if where are we? If I go in and I make changes to the code and I test it locally, and this is just the case with Visual Studio Code, my understanding is, you know, I can just make a pull request here.
Yeah, it's not that part of the workflow. The key part of the workflow is being able to have a design dialogue. I mean, you know, you'll write code and it won't be approved or merged because it's just a bad idea.
That's true.
We need.
And this is where the RChain improvement process comes in.
Okay.
And we enter an issue on there and discuss it there on
Okay.
GitHub, I guess is where we're doing it now, moving it off of Jira.
So Jim, you asked, you know, what is the problem? So yeah, as Arthur said, this is not the problem. I mean, for example, you also need to sign every commit. So you need to configure your keys, you know, to sign the commit. So the problem is some part of the code is needs some cleanup, and changing this can be difficult. And you know, if we can have some kind of documentation that developers can read and say, oh, this part is problematic, I can do something here, or you know, this part of the code needs to be changed, and it doesn't make too much sense to you know, to make some, you know, bigger changes on this. So this is what I'm thinking, and this is why I would like to talk about Tiger's Final, because this is how we want to, you know, build other stuff. And if we can simplify what we have now, it will be much easier to implement all this other stuff, because there is a very big chunk of work to implement behavioral types. And in current code, this will not be so easy. And also, for example, the complete storage layer is very difficult to maintain. So we have now we are storing we are using database LMDB as a database, but we also have direct you know, writing to a file. So we have different ways of doing the same thing, and it would be great if we can, you know, fix this thing first and then develop new stuff. But what you, Arthur, what you said about this addition to Rholang, especially if, for general purpose Rholang, this should be much easier to create pull requests and add new stuff, right? This is not if it is not, you know, available on the blockchain, it's much easier to just explain what is new or change existing stuff, right? Mm-hmm. If we don't have too much Rholang code, now I'm thinking about very like change that will have consequences. I'm thinking about a new update for Rholang 1.1, and this change will be changing the syntax. So this is also something that will, this breaking change, we need to handle it somehow. So I can. Do you have any question about that?
No.
So I would like to share my screen. So I clean up the whole everything from my repository with git clean, and that was the only thing that helped to rebuild the project. I see sometimes after IntelliJ is updated, I need to clean up idea folder from the project. So maybe that was the problem. I'm not sure, but compiling in IntelliJ was failing, and compiling in directly in terminal with SBT, it was fine. So I'm not sure why this sometimes happens.
Thank God I'm not using IntelliJ. I actually just made it work with the syntax highlighting everything on the Visual Studio Code. So I can actually check definitions and all that stuff.
But can you debug?
You're using.
I'm not sure. I haven't tried yet.
Oh, okay.
Probably.
If you can do that, that'll be awesome.
Using the scale of metals attachment add-on, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've got that to work as well. The metals add-on with syntax highlighting and discovery. It's great.
I had an issue like before. It only showed me like some basic syntax highlighting, but I couldn't just pick definitions and stuff. But now it magically works again.
Yeah, the basic plugin for Visual Studio Code for Scala is just syntax highlighting, so it's without any information from the compiler. So for loading the project in the IntelliJ, the first step is some kind of process of importing, and this is something related to IntelliJ. So IntelliJ will read SBT file, and it will do something, and this do something is some SBT command to probably the same thing as we are doing in console. But if you are not if you didn't compile the project in terminal in SBT, this will fail in IntelliJ. So first compile this in SBT in terminal, and then open IntelliJ. So when this is done, I can compile directly from the menu. I can compile the project, and this should be very quick because I already compiled it. Yeah. Okay. So now I want to create new configuration. So to debug, we have two options: to use IntelliJ to start new instance of our node and directly connect to debugger, or just attach to existing instance. To attach to existing instance, I had one problem, but there is a way to like a workaround to to connect. And there is some permissions that need to configure, but it can be done. It's not a problem. So the first thing is for this configuration to specify the main entry point. And this should be the main in node project, the main class. We need some arguments to run the node, and this is the standard arguments. Whatever you need, you can enter here, like the normal terminal CLI arguments. And also, I think the module needs to be specified. This is R node, where in R node project or node project here is the entry point with creation of all the instances that are needed. So I will save this as default, and I will from this default I will create a configuration, and I think this should be enough. So I think I don't have. Oh, I have already started one, so I will disable this, and I will start in debugging mode. For example, let's go to the main function of the beginning. So let's see if this will work. So this should be the standard output of the node. Okay, so this is the node started. So I can do maybe something. So now I'm creating the node. This is the instance that is started. So, for example, I can go to block API and put the breakpoint. Oh, it's working now. Put the breakpoint on get blocks. Where it is, get blocks. So next request. Oh, did I start it in, oh, I didn't start in debug, I think. Oh, let me start again. I think I was just running the node. Because Genesis is already present, this is pretty fast. Let's try again. Okay, so now we are in the debugger. So we see here we have Casper instance with all the stuff that Casper has. For example, wallet ID is the private key or information about private key, and there is none. And topological sort is all of the blocks that are available in the node. In the memory, just the mapping from block to block metadata, and we have only one block, the Genesis block.
So what you have done is you stopped the execution at line 482, yes? Or
yes.
Yes.
Did you say stopped?
Yes.
Yep.
What did you just do with the red dot?
Oh, sorry. Yeah. So this is how you create a breakpoint.
Okay.
Oh yeah. good that you asked, because I was just, you know, assuming this is like a normal thing. And, yeah.
And
So
in the browser, the request, is it now, is it like ever loading request?
Yes, you see here that is waiting.
Okay.
It's still, and see here, it's still processing. So when I click here to continue, resume F5, it should end the request. And now the request ended.
Great.
So I will stop the node. I will leave the breakpoint here, and I will start the same executable that is created. I compiled it already with stage. So this is the executable that I'm referring here. And also I'm creating, I'm adding this additional CLI arguments to support debugging. And these two URLs are providing information for that. This other one is if you have this operation not permitted error, you can change something, some permissions that I don't know what exactly is doing. But I had this error and I needed to do this. So I'm starting this node. So now this node is started with my own commands, my own validator private key and the bonds file and everything what is needed for correct validator. So now I will be able to deploy. So first I need to attach debugger. This should be the only one. Yeah. Okay, this should be connected. So let's try to make a request. Oh, it's still computing Genesis. Yeah, because I'm pointing to different data directory. So when I was starting from here, directly from IntelliJ, I didn't specify what is the data directory. So data directory was in my home directory. So now we need to wait. Yeah, and now it's done. So now I can issue new request, and it should break on the same place. So you see here, I can see the the variables in scope. Is this make sense? Is this clear?
Yeah. Is there a window which has any trace logs from the code?
Trace in a sense of call stack, right?
Yeah, no, not call stack. Just any trace statements that we have in the code.
trace to trace in a sense, write into a log or
Yeah. I think there is some logging already in the code. I mean, I'll look and ask. I'll be more precise about my question. Let me have a look.
So we have logging that displays information in the in the standard output and in the Arnold log, right? If you think about that.
Oh, okay, okay.
This log will also display the thread identifier. So you know which thread display this. We have also another way of tracing code. This is what is part of the metrics. For example, we should have something here with the spans. So, for example, this one. So this span trace and other methods on span. We are using this command library to push information about which method is executed, or which code if you want to for example trace what is the execution time of some part of the code. And also the problem is when you're executing in a multi-threaded system, it's very difficult to understand which happens after what, because you have the same code executed from multiple threads. So this trace helps to push information about one, not one thread, because code maybe is changing thread. One function can execute multiple parts in different threads, but they are all part of the same execution, of the same context, so with this trace, we are pushing this information with these labels, and with Jagger, which collects information via InfluxDB. The Jagger is front UI or sorry?
Jagger not connecting with the InfluxDB. It's a side server.
Okay, but from where it's acquiring the data?
Now it is streaming data directly to Jagger. Jagger is a server, and it has a front end.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks for bringing this up. Yeah.
Okay, but can I see those traces as part of my development experience? Like if I run it now, can I see them?
So yeah, if you want to see it, you need to configure your Jagger server.
Oh, okay. Okay, great. Thanks.
And in tests, we don't have anything for that. So we are using just mock in tests. So maybe sometimes if you develop something in test, it will be nice that you can have the same tools to work with that. But for now, this is not how it's configured. But we are using this stuff. Yes.
That Prometheus stuff that is in the node, it's used in integration tests. So I guess you can get some information from the Prometheus. If you enable starters with the Prometheus flag, it will expose from the Node web API some data.
I don't know if this is off topic, but what are we using the InfluxDB for?
For all metrics that are related to performance and everything. So the InfluxDB is the source for the target for most of the metrics. So we have metrics, which is like how much time does it cost to spend this or that method, and we have spans. Spans is accumulated inside one call distribution of how much time is spent on this and that.
Mm-hmm. So what I'm wondering is if we should put out a document for developers to say, here is what you can get from Jaeger, here is what you can get from Prometheus, here is what you can get from InfluxDB.
Yeah, I was thinking I was going, and I'm going to do that on the local shard with the Docker to add Jaeger, InfluxDB, and all that stuff, and get so people can get a sense of what's available.
Yeah, what's available and how to get to that. Okay, thank you.
So related to that, I just want to say that InfluxDB is one of the options that you can use. So this library, command library, can push like standard way of these messages. So you can use InfluxDB or Prometheus or something else to collect this information and display in some other way. So what we are using is you know, one of the ways how you interpret this information. Any other question?
Well, I have a question, but I mean, this debugging, it was really great. But I tell you, the other thing that I really like about the, you know, under the Casper folder, there's a really nice kind of a unit test framework for testing Rholang code, and it'd be really nice to be able to use that, you know, outside of, you know, running the whole development environment. So, you know, you have the Rholang code, and then you have the tests, and the you know, the tests, they do tracing, and then they you know, separate your test from your code, and they also use the registry operations so that you can you know, create unique names or unforgeable names so that they can be referenced. They're really nice to have some way of doing unit testing of contracts. Because right now when I'm developing a contract, I kind of got my test and my contract all in the same file.
Yeah, I'm not completely sure. I can just say how this test is working here.
Yeah, but look at that. I mean, that row spec contract, that's like a nice test framework, right?
Yeah. So I want to say something about that. So we have Scala code. Let me see. For proof of stake. So this is the test, and we have Scala code that is loading this Rholang file and executing everything.
Right.
And I'm not sure where this is. PS spec. So it's here in the Genesis contracts. So we have this row spec. I don't know enough to really say everything, but I know that we have this special row spec which is used for I think all the other as a base for all the other specific tests.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want to run this code, because this row spec is part of the Scala testing framework, it's extending classes of the test framework, so it's like normal Scala test. And with IntelliJ, if you go with this inside this test with right click, you can run the test as any other Scala test. And this will compile the Rholang code. I think put some additional deploys,
Mm-hmm.
timeout, and some parameters.
Yeah, it's really nice.
I'm
It's just all.
not sure if, yeah, everything is part of the testing framework. So it's executed as a Scala test, and it's part of the CI.
Right. But I'm saying this is like, I'm developing my contract, right? And I'd like to have my contract and my tests, but use this testing framework outside of running, it's not packaged in a way that I can use it in my build system, right?
Outside of the RChain repository.
Right.
Yeah. So I think you can reference the library, but
Okay.
yeah, but where is this raw spec? This is all in Casper project, so
Right.
yeah. I mean, Casper is the biggest, I think. So
Yeah, I tried that. I tried to like reference the project and use it, but it was really gnarly. It didn't work out too well. But it's super useful. I mean, it like really is good.
yeah, I think that we have some parts that are useful, but are not built to be extracted,
Right.
and used in some other way. So
yeah,
we can also think about that and see how can we extract this in the smaller projects there.
Mm-hmm.
So is this more a Scala job or a Rholang job to create a framework that's usable outside?
This is more Scala stuff.
Yeah. Well, it's both, right? I mean, they like roast.
Yep.
It's both, but it's the Scala part is the hardest part to kind of pull out and use right now.
Yeah. Related to that, I would like to say we have many places where, for example, we have the definition of the trait in the same project where we have implementations.
Mm.
So this doesn't give you, these abstractions that or modularity, right? Because usually what you're expecting is some kind of SDK, which is just interfaces, right? That there is no implementation. And then you introduce in your project, your implementation or some nice implementation or whatever, but you have these interfaces that are defining your SDK. So it would be nice that we can go in this direction and, move the interfaces in a project like we have here, the shared project, and with all the interfaces. For example, now we have LMDB here, and with all with these useful interfaces. For example, you can have Casper traits that for tests, and you just reference this shared project and one project with implementation, and you are done. You can use it in your project. And this is definitely, we should think about that more. Yeah. And because one of the things I was looking, for example, this LMDB store, it's moved here because we don't have interface for LMDB, because our store interface is in the RSpace project. So if you have if some project doesn't use RSpace, you don't have this, and this project is block store. So in one moment, block store was in block store LNDB was needed, and it was not available. And the same thing is you probably noticed when you were working on this specialized system processes. In Rholang, you don't have anything almost, right? If you want to create some system process that is using Casper, I mean, you don't have reference to Casper, and you cannot create reference to Casper because Casper is referencing Rholang. So the same thing. If we can have interfaces in shared project, we can reference shared project in Rholang, and we can have interface for Casper. And in RNode project, I want to show also RNode project where everything is connected. So, for example, if Rholang is now have this interface for Casper, it's only needs this implementation. You know, in the runtime, it needs implementation to be supplied. And this can be done in RNode project where, you know, all the interfaces are created and where is the main entry point. And this is the node runtime where these interfaces are created. And also some of these are still errors in IntelliJ. I'm not completely sure why. Although everything is compiling IntelliJ, because IntelliJ has its own compiler for this displaying of errors and, you know, navigation. So it's not completely in sync with SBT always. And so in this node runtime, we have a creation of all instances. And this is now, this doesn't look very nice because the file is huge. And these instances are you know, moved from one function to another, and then another function, and then supply to another function. So this is something that you know, we can simplify. And I was thinking this can be you know, a task for someone who is not the core developer, right? Because it's, you know, if you have knowledge about Scala, this can be done. But for now, it's pretty hard to work with, because, you know, it's not structured in some way. It's just the big you know, creation of instances.
So can I ask another question?
Yeah, sure.
So let's say you know, I wanted to add a Merkle tree to complement maps, lists, sets. What would I have to do for that?
Where do you want to add Merkle tree?
I want to have a Merkle tree exposed in the Rholang language, so I can use it just like I can use a map.
So you mean Merkle tree in a sense of from, for example, expose tree map from Scala or something like that?
Yeah. No. In Rholang now, you can have maps, lists, and sets as data structures. I want to have a Merkle tree.
So now the maps, sets, and lists are just we just have wrapper around Scala maps, sets, and lists.
Okay, can you
this
show?
This is why I'm asking you, do you want to expose tree map, because tree map is very similar to Merkle tree.
Yeah, it's a hypothetical, so I can understand. If you can show me what I'd have to do if I did that. It's a hypothetical question.
Yeah. So I'm thinking where I want to look. So I think I can start from method as definition for method in Rholang.
Mm-hmm.
So this really means when you have any process in Rholang, the dot and the name of the method and the arguments, right? This is what you need. So if you know what is the process and what are the arguments, this is what constitute a method.
Mm-hmm.
So this is how we can find methods per the map. I'm not exactly where is creation of the maps or lists, but maybe I can find where the method is called and then somehow, you know, see how can I find out other, but also we can see that this method is operating on Scala underlying type. So one of the method can be split or append, but I want to search as a text. So now I'm searching by implementation. Okay, I don't see anything. What is the contains? This seems like a par set. I'm not completely sure where this is implemented.
Okay.
Map ops. This is probably not that.
Also, I'm wondering if Mike Stay's tree hash map code could be directly used by Arthur for what he wants to do, because that's been fairly modularized, I think, right?
But Arthur is asking in a way that, you know, if you want to implement your own structure in the Scala and then expose it to Rholang. So we have tree hash map directly in the Rholang, but this doesn't involve using any Scala. So yeah. This is more like a hypothetical question, right? Do we have? Yeah. Steve, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, well, there was a pause there. I wasn't sure where you were in your presentation of IntelliJ. If we keep the session to an hour, we can certainly go over if everyone chooses, but if we want to keep it to an hour, we have 10 more minutes. Why don't I jump in here and just kind of talk about our education program as a whole, and just kind of go over our planning document, and then talk about what Theo's working on, and then after that, then we can resume back to IntelliJ if everyone wants to continue on there.
Steve, can I take 2 minutes to discuss
go ahead,
something
Rao.
before you go there? So one of the things I want to pay some attention to, want us to pay some attention to, is the documentation needed. So there's both activity in documentation to say, okay, what do we have, what do we not have, what is the relative prioritized list of gaps that need to be filled from a documentation perspective. So I thought this is the best forum to raise that question, to say what are the requirements, what are the gaps, and what's the priority of what we need to do there, from perhaps multiple perspectives. From a validator perspective, from a developer perspective, both a Scala developer and a Rholang developer perspective, but primarily starting with the outside in, from a Rholang and validator perspective. So I know NutZipper has done quite a bit of work in there. There are bits and pieces in there. So I want to actually have a small task force, if you would, that can spend maybe an hour or two every day to get to that point of here is what we have, what we don't have, and here is what we need to create, and then figure out how we go about doing that. Any volunteers for that?
Yeah, well, I'd be happy to. Oh, go ahead. Someone else.
I have a question. Where should the document goes to? Where should the documents rise to? Where should we put the documents?
For now, we're using Confluence as the repository of all documents. Right. I mean, we don't have another repository at the moment. I mean, there are. I take that back. I guess NutZipper's the website that NutZipper is maintaining is another, and then the developer.rchain.coop is another one. But I see these other places as really more the front ends, if you would, to having a single source of documentation. Sometimes maybe we'll have some slightly different thing, but I would like to have one repository, even if there are a couple of different front ends to that. Does that make sense?
I agree with you. We need one repository, and I think that's the priority things. We should create that or point to some. Everybody can work on the repository or something else. I'm not sure. Right now, we don't even get that. I think that's the priority.
What do you mean by you don't even get that? Like,
where we put the documentation now.
Okay, so let's decide as a group. We have a lot of people here, and thank you, Gurinder. Sorry for the late response. Thank you for joining us. I'll be sure to include you in the future. So as a group, where do we decide, where do we think is appropriate as a central repository for technical documentation? And initially it's going to be regarding Scala development and Rholang. So NutZipper, you might have some thoughts on that as far as what your preference would be. Or does anyone have, so we...
Give me a minute, please. I thought developer RChain.com had a fairly sizable already documentation. Is that not where we want to continue with it?
So this documentation in RChain repository, it cannot be easily changed, right? You need to create pull request and to be merged, and so maybe we can have some more place when it's much easier to add stuff and
Okay.
I believe that we can, at least we have an understanding that some pieces of code need maintenance, for example, refactoring node runtime, or making the storage, everything stored inside LMDB, or making code modular, or updating to Scala 2.13. All these tasks can be formed as an issues in the repo. So people who potentially can contribute, they have a GitHub account and they can take part in discussions in these issues. So I think that particularly these tasks are good to be formed as in GitHub issues. And then we have another topic, is a documentation for DApp developers. This is not related to core development, so this is just this is another beast, and this should be another resource like Rholang GitHub.io or readme.io. So I would first we need to decide about what we are talking about. Documentation for developing of the core platform or depth development.
So
okay.
I agree, and so I agree, and I think that we can collect in different places, right? We can start with documentation in different places, and when we collect some amount of documentation, we can say, oh, this is useful, or you know, this is not so good, and
yeah.
So when we have something, we can decide. I think that, you know, if we start from you know, just, oh, here is the place, you know, I'm not sure that we will, you know.
And we have RChain Community repo. So if you have some idea, you can just join the RChain Community and spin up your own repo there. So people not search for pieces of Rholang code or any useful services around the GitHub. So I would encourage everyone, if they have some repos, to put them into the RChain Community, because you can be an admin here and create your own repos, or at least much simpler than into the official RChain repo, because it's kind of maybe legal deal, I don't know.
So let's do this, and thank you, Will, for bringing this up, because this it's a common frustration among everyone, and I sympathize with that, because you know I too want to have easy access. So how about this as a plan? You know, we have let me create a document. As far as first, we need to understand or where all the current repositories are. Just create a list, and then we start to understand for each of these repositories, what are they used for? You know, what's there, and then I think we'll be in a better position to, you know, with this, you know, certain information is going to have a better place than others. So I get the sense that having a central repository may not necessarily be the right answer, but I think what we need is a document or something, at least right now, that lists where all the information is and can be found. So let me start to create that, and so we have a education channel in Discord. So that's where all of these conversations are going to happen. So what I'll do is I'll post the document there, and I'll work on gathering this information. And then each week when we announce these sessions, in the announcement, I'll list the link to this, you know, master repository document. And each week, you know, or as needed, we'll work on figuring it out, you know, figuring out this documentation issue that we have. So that's what I'm thinking as an approach for right now. So, because I don't want people, I know there's there's an issue, and I don't want people to get, you know, I understand the frustration, but at least know that we're making steps forward to address it.
Yeah, I mean, the reason I brought that up here, I mean, we could presumably, as a development team, handle some part of this discussion, but I didn't want it to be just a development team preference type of a thing, as opposed to a wider community driven requirements and gaps, right? I mean, we kind of, as development team, we may have a perspective on, okay, we think this is what is needed, but we want the community to come and tell us also, okay, this is the additional things that we need. So what I'm actually trying to do is put some focus on the development task. I don't want to take the focus away from the education piece. I want to leave this slot purely focused on the education thing, but I want to have a development conversation, I mean, documentation conversation, sorry, that's separate. And we can do it in the same channel as education, or we can have a separate channel. That does not really matter too much to me. And like I said, as a development team, we will grapple with some of the issues, but I want to have a forum where we can engage with the community on the documentation requirements, current state, improvements, potentially contributions from the community to take on some of those tasks, so that the development team is not overburdened. So that's kind of, I really want to have a fairly intense focus on it for the next several weeks, so that as we run these ideathons, as we run the education sessions, if we have, I see documentation as a key enabler for the success of these efforts. So if we have that, put some significant effort into the documentation piece, and get it right, then as we do education, as we do ideathons and all that, all those things become a little bit easier.
Agreed. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
So this is Arthur.
Yes. Go ahead, Arthur.
It's not. I mean, it would be nice to have a wiki. I mean, the journey that I've just been going through was, first of all, I had to figure out how to host R nodes. Then I had to figure out how to extend R nodes because I needed to use zero knowledge proofs. Now I'm working on building the DApp, and then after that I need to build the app, right? So I mean, you got to there's 4 steps you have to go through before you have something that someone can actually use. And then as part of that journey, there's a tool set and the operating system issues that you have to deal with. So, documentation is always hard to update. I mean, for example, you're going to change a language to the syntax. Documentation is hard, but it would be nice to have a how-to to start from hosting to get to your app.
Okay, and I'm going to follow up with you on that, Arthur. Thank you.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
So I just to sort of clarify in my head, I think what I heard NetZipper and perhaps Arthur just mentioned as well, that there, in a sense, 2 sets of documentation. There's some core development, internal development of the platform documentation, and then perhaps a end user developer documentation. I mean, not end user as a development on top of the platform documentation. So is that somehow might help to break up two sets of documentation?
Yeah, they're not completely separate, but yeah, definitely.
I mean, just at least for my, trying to understand where I think what Arthur was asking and NetZipper was mentioning earlier. That if I understood it,
I believe that documentation for core developers should be inside their RChain repo. So there is a wiki where we can outline such things like, for example, how to add a parameter, or how to do that, or how to do this, and issues where we point things that are needed to be improved.
Right, we're not using the GitHub wiki, right, for the repo, are we? Question.
There is a wiki.
But we're not using it, are we?
Almost empty.
Yeah, it's empty.
Yeah, no, at the moment we're not using the GitHub wiki. We're using the Confluence for some parts of that, and the rest of it is in websites like either developer.rchain or NetZipper's readthedocs.io. So that's kind of where I would say those are the 3 different places we have stuff in right now: is Confluence, readthedocs.io, and developer.rchain. And I think there were individual repos like a Dan Connolly or Joshi may have created their own stuff in their repos. Go ahead, NetZipper, sorry, you were saying something.
I believe that now we don't have any documentation for developers. So if anybody wants to work on the core platform, there's no resource to get a understanding on what is where except reading the code. So we should create.
So are you saying that what's in Confluence is out of date? Is that what you're saying? Confluence has a developer, what do you call, like the developer onboarding documentation that I was referring Gurinder to when he came on. I don't know if he found it useful or not, but
I believe it's outdated for sure.
yeah, exactly. So it's outdated. So we need, and in fact, the other day, Gurinder was making the comment that maybe we should archive everything on Confluence and just only pull out pieces that are still useful and up to date. But those are the activities essentially I'm trying for this work group, a separate work group, to address, is to say, identify, okay, what is there, what is not there, what can be recovered, retrieved, modified from what we have, and what needs to be developed and new. And is there something we can generate out of Scala? All those kinds of things. To really address what we can do both for core developers, but my focus is almost, first let's see if we can help the Rholang or dApp developers, like Arthur was saying, give them a pathway to say you need to do this, 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 and this for you to get your app ready. Here are all the different relevant pieces of the documentation so that at least they can get going while we clean up the developer onboarding documentation.
And to
separately.
get access to Confluence, you have to have an account, as far as I remember. So to my experience, when you're not into this development, to get some data from the Confluence is quite a pain. So
yeah, no, so here is the thing. I mean, I agree with you with the GitHub, especially for end user documentation or whatever would get heavy community participation in, I think should be moved to GitHub so that it's easier. I mean, they're developing and they're familiar with it and all that kind of stuff. As to where the core documentation needs to be, I'm okay either way, wherever it makes sense. I mean, what I am a little bit worried about, though, is if everybody is doing their own repositories, and if there is not a way for people to consistently search across those, how do we handle that issue? How do we then, like we're saying, for this go to Josh's tutorials, for this go to Dan Conley's, and for this go to Tomislav's repo, and then for this go to Jim Weiscarver's repo? How do we handle that mess? I mean, we need to have a easy pathway, even if it is just a veneer or a skin on top of existing repositories, that we can, there still needs to be consistency from the standpoint of what a developer needs to go through, and there should be a single point of entry, even if the repositories are different.
So what I would suggest, I mean, I think trying to do any kind of large scale, reorganization of documentation, I think neither somebody has the time or the attention span to, make sure that, it gets done the right way. So rather than doing a huge reorganization, what my suggestion would be, just first, let's spend, this week, maybe attempt to inventory what we have, where we have it, and then we can look at it and say, okay, what information out of this is current and needs to be updated? And then we can basically just even one page with all the information that we collected would be a good start to leave everything where it is and basically say, here is the current snapshot. And from here onward, we're going to choose for core development, GitHub, for user end development, for example, developer.rchain.coop, because I think we want also have some level of control of what kind of documentation is exposed to the end developers as opposed to free for all. And if the community still wants to maintain their own set of documentation, we can certainly have a link on this main page of documentation. But what I'm suggesting is, rather than saying, okay, we're going to move things, which is what I was initially thinking, that we take archive entire documentation and pick and choose what is up to date, I think might be a large effort. Perhaps we can look at something which is quick and gets to the point, rather than spending a large scale time and effort.
Agreed. That's
Yeah.
a good starting point.
So,
So
when I find something that is
thank you, Gurinder.
on somebody else's GitHub, I would go to fork it. And in this case, it's forked to the RChain community and it's forked to Jim Scarver. What I don't know how to do is how to keep this up to date with the original repository, or if that's a good practice. Do we want to fork these things into that are relevant to RChain, into the RChain community GitHub repository?
Okay. Well, the good thing is we don't have to make those decisions right now. I think Gurinder's kind of laid out a plan of action that we need to follow as a group, and that is identify what we have. So if we start to do that, I think that's a big step forward. So I'm going to create a Google Doc. For right now, this is what's easy for me, and it's going to be in our education folder, which everyone should have access to. And I'm going to, once I create it, I'll kind of, I will put the link in our education Discord channel announcing, hey, everyone, this is a document that we're going to use to inventory what is out there regards to documentation. And then we'll work on, you know, once everything's there, we'll start to move things around and get it, you know, understandable. So I think that's the first phase. And as we do this, we'll start to figure out what the next step is. So the first step is just inventory what is out there. So so good. So Rao, does that sound, you know, point taken? So we recognize what the issue is, and we have at least we have a first step.
Yeah, and I'm wondering, like, is there an hour on Thursday or Friday that we could pick to focus on documentation?
Good point. Okay, so let's see here. Let me look at the calendar.
May I just add to that? So I'm not sure if you know, if you're writing documentation, if you can just sit down and, you know, spend a few hours and you know, write the complete page of something, because probably you don't have all the information, or you need to test something before you can be sure. So I'm seeing this more in the sense of, you know, you have some part and then you stuck to do something else, and you have some questions. So I'm thinking this central repository is what Gurinder said. I agree, but we have, for example, if you know something, you can just create a gist in the GitHub and say, oh, I know these things. You know, I have some questions. So in this gist, you can, you know, someone else can ask some question, and you can refine this documentation. And at the end, you can say, oh, now this documentation is good enough. And, you know, I will create pull requests to main repository, to you know, this community repository that is more complete. So I'm seeing what I want to say is everybody can write something, right? And it would be nice that we can talk about different versions and say, oh, you are doing this, you're doing this. Oh, you know, we can have a session and you know, just not talk about in the clouds, right? We can talk about real real things that someone, you know, writes something, and we can say, oh, this is good enough, and, you know, please move it there, or you know, link it from somewhere, and in this sense.
Yeah, no, I think I agree. I mean, I'm sorry. I agree. I think anything that we put together, any kind of documentation, has to have a capability to either comment on the documentation or allow the reader to be able to append, some information as well. So yeah, I mean, it should not be static pages for sure. I think that's the only way to sort of like keep it maybe somewhat maintained, if not ideally 100% up to date. I agree with Slav on that. That's what I'm saying. Like GitHub, having a GitHub is, I think, a good place. I think it allows non-technical and somewhat technical, technical people to be able to update the docs as needed.
Yeah. I mean, one of the initial gists could be this single pointer page that we're talking about that points to existing documentation could be a start as the first activity. But one thing I found when Arthur was doing gist and all that was that just like Google Docs, gists are also hard to find unless somebody gave you the specific links or something. So we need to think about that and see how we can improve that. And certainly having a single place where we publish all the quote unquote finished or semi-finished gists too, maybe that will take care of that issue. But that's one thing I found with both GIS and Google Docs is that somehow it's hard to look at them because somehow the title doesn't seem to be, the subject doesn't seem to be part of the title. But anyways, that's we can work around that.
I mean, I found this also useful because if you're writing something that is not, very valuable and, it's not searchable, yeah, this is completely fine. It's not relevant. So if you have links to this gist or document from many places, this means that this stuff is important or useful.
Okay, and Raul, the comment as far as having a session on Thursday and Friday for documentation, let's hold off on that for right now. Let's have these conversations in the education Discord channel as we coordinate, and then we'll have a segment, a few minutes each week during this session just to provide a documentation update. So I think let's work through that for right now. But I think if we just take an inventory of what's out there, that's a good first step. And also, I need to familiarize myself with GIST, and maybe instead of using a Google Doc to compile this, maybe GIST. But I have to get up to speed as well as using these tools that are available to us as well.
Yeah, and related to that, GIST is more for developers because you can write the code with syntax highlighting, but this is not the silver bullet, right? If you are saying that for you Google Docs makes more sense, and I completely agree. I mean, why you must be forced to use GIST, and which is not for you. So yeah, I mean.
Very good, understood.
I guess basically maybe for now we can agree to say that it'll be either GIST or Google Docs that will be linked to a particular page where you have a title and the context described in that connecting page, and then you click on it and you go to the right page with the right permissions or something like that.
Right. So. And this is a starting point. This isn't necessarily the end game or the end result, but this is our first step. So we want to keep that in mind. So we're a few minutes over. I don't know. I want to be sensitive to everyone's schedule, but let's see here. Let me just briefly talk about. I just want to bring up the planning document that we've been working with here for the education group, and after that, I just want to talk about our goals. The goal, I think it came up during the tech governance meeting a week or two ago, is, what are the goals for this education group? So just in our conversation, we have, quarterly goals, so we're in the second quarter of the year. So if we come up with what we think of as what our second quarter goals and third quarter goals are, and work towards achieving those. So we have kind of, something in mind that we're working towards. So you can read through what I kind of highlighted, pulled out. I'm just kind of pulling out what I see as the goals are from all these conversations that we have, and I'll add, start to create and manage documentation as well. So that will be sort of to start that would be an example of a second quarter goal. So read through what I have here, and if you have any thoughts or comments, feel free to add them. And I'm continuously updating the Scala, RChain Scala Educational Series page. So look through that. And with our tech governance meeting last week, Theo had the conversations were around monitoring tools, node monitoring tools. So Theo had a lot of insight into that. So he's going to, start to work. We created a document, and he's going to help organize his thoughts as far as what his thoughts are on node monitoring tools. So, and it may be that everyone has a little bit of information that everyone else needs. And the idea is, how do we share it amongst ourselves? So, this is a perfect case with, Theo. He's a node validator. He has his ideas and experience on node monitoring and tools that he used. So now the idea is to capture that and, to get it, disseminated among those of us who are interested. So, and so that idea is, everyone has special knowledge that everyone else wants. So how we're going to do that is, part of this exercise in, education is this, sharing of knowledge. So just kind of, internalize that, and I guess think about, what is it special knowledge that I have that others would find valuable as well. And then, when that, topic of conversation comes up in tech governance or this, you'll kind of say, it'll be kind of brought to the forefront, and then, we'll do something similar to what Theo's doing, is, creating, formalizing it, so just to be cognizant of, we all have value that we need to extract and disseminate to everybody else. So part of the process. So we're coming on an hour and a half here. I don't want these sessions to get too long, but I think we have we have some important items, which is documentation. So we'll start that conversation in Discord. So look for that, and we'll pick up where we left off in these conversations for today, with whether it's IntelliJ or a new topic for next week. So how does everyone feel about that as approach? Any comments or feedback from anybody? Okay.
Yeah, I just what you said, I agree, and I'm thinking that if you know something that you have some information, in a sense you can own this topic, right? Because you're spending some hours, and you just tried something, and I'm thinking when someone is writing documentation, we are working in this distributed fashion. So you have your signature in a sense, right? Because you want to know who wrote this. So you can maybe ask him, oh, you know, I want to continue, or I try this, and you know, I can add something. And you know, I see us humans as, you know, we are somehow now distributing this information. So we need to know who wrote something, right? So you can ask this person, and you know, maybe work together, and you know.
I love it.
Just, you know,
that's so to the point. You know, a topic owner. You know, in my telecom world, we call them SMEs, which is a really weird word, subject matter expert or something like that. But topic owner is just more, I mean, it's intuitive. So as we, so for instance, as an example, a node monitoring tools, who would be the topic expert on that? Theo would be. So we kind of, you think of who, you know, if you have an issue, who's that first person you can kind of go to with a question. And then, you know, from there, then you kind of, if he's not available or he doesn't know, he can, you know, you can together work, because if the subject matter expert doesn't have the answer, he's going to be curious. He's going to be like, man, I don't know that. I want to know that. So two of you can go and work through to find the answer and work down the, you know, the chain of who knows what the answers would be. So let me incorporate this idea of a topic owner into this education kind of format that we're creating. So great suggestion. Thanks, Thomas.
Yeah, I would just say expand that to think of owner as a team. Topic owner team, maybe taught. Just because a lot of times you have at least 2 or 3 people, plus you need a backup. I mean, you know, if somebody's sick or whatever, or lost interest in the project. So in general, I guess, think of that as a topic owner team.
Okay, understood. Yeah, so there's going to be somebody who's going to be the expert regardless in any area, but you know, they won't be the only person who knows what to do. There'll be others, and we can kind of think of it loosely as, you know, as the topic owner team. So point taken. Okay.
Yeah, in open source, it's kind of common to have in open source project, it's common to have like code maintainers, someone who knows how to maintain a certain feature and know how it works.
Code maintainers.
So if that maintainer leaves the project, then there is like a question, almost like removing the feature, because no one can maintain it.
Well, and that speaks, yeah.
Hopefully, eventually, we'll have like someone who knows a lot about airspace, someone who knows about Rholang, who can actually maintain the like packages themselves, small repositories.
Exactly, and that speaks to, you know, when you have one person who has all the knowledge and they somehow leave or go away, you know, it's you know, who's picking up the mantle to follow. If there's, you know, you have to have some knowledge transfer going on. You know, that's all about, you know, this education process, so that no one person necessarily has everything, that others as well. And there's a process that's going on, an active process where this is actively happening, to where the information is constantly being disseminated, transferred to others. So these are the things that, you know, we need to think about and work through as we, you know, think about, you know, education transfer, and, you know, code maintenance and so forth. So yeah, another point well taken. All right. Okay, well, thank you, everybody. I appreciate your time, and we'll be back here next week and pick up where we left off. So I'll see everybody in the Discord channel. Okay, have a great week. Yep.
See you.
Bye now.
All right, thanks everyone. See you.